Welcome back. This week we're tackling the issue of dementia. We're joined by Buttrose, the President of Alzheimer's Australia, and Professor Henry Brodaty from the University of New South Wales, Ron Sinclair, the Chair of the Consumer Dementia Research Network, and Stephen Judd, the Chief Executive of the aged care provider HammondCare. I want to look at the issue of caring for people with dementia. You often hear that it's so important to keep the mind, the brain active. How do you do that? Is it jigsaw puzzles, crosswords, that sort of thing, or is it more sophisticated than that?
I mean, if you don't have dementia, if you're trying to prevent having dementia?
Well, both.
Well, we've just launched a program called Your Brain Matters, which is the world's first risk reduction program, and in it we say if you keep physically, mentally and socially active, these are very important preventative steps. So how do you keep the brain active? You challenge it. You challenge it with something it doesn't know. The brain likes to be challenged. And as you get older, you tend to do things you're familiar with. We all understand that, but you
take up new hobbies.
New hobby, new sport, new language, painting, anything.
Can any of this prevent dementia if you're...
There are no guarantees in life, and I can't guarantee you that this will work, but it wouldn't do you any harm.
No, I think that's true.
It was estimated, there was a really brilliant study about a year ago. You take the 7 factors, reversible factors, reduce them by 25%, things like physical inactivity, mental inactivity, diabetes, obesity, and so on. Reduce those factors by 25%, we could reduce the number of people in the world with dementia by 3 million.
Yeah, cholesterol and blood pressure, they're important things to watch out for. And the physical thing, the physical exercise that Henry mentioned, people don't realise it, that the brain benefits from physical exercise. We know these things are really good preventative steps, but a lot of Australians don't.
So what's good for your body and what's good for your heart is also good for your brain.
Yeah, what's good for your heart.
So the sort of things you should be doing anyway will help.
Yeah.
Will help.
So exercising, actually eating, sort of fish, for example.
Mediterranean diet,
Mediterranean
food rich in antioxidants.
What about once you have some form of dementia? What
the evidence is a bit weaker there,
right.
but certainly doing the same sort of things may help slow the rate of decline. That evidence is a bit soft,
is it?
But it's certainly good for the health generally.
But socialisation is really important for those people, and so getting people involved in perhaps activities that they used to do, take them back, because that's what tends to happen with people.
Is that hard though? I mean, when you're diagnosed with dementia, I'm imagining there is some stigma that goes along with it as well. How do you... Socialising, you've all said, is an important thing to do for the mind.
I think you have to be aggressive about it, because people leave you.
I think you just do it.
What do you mean people leave you?
When you get a diagnosis and people find out, very often they have no idea how to behave with you.
They're embarrassed.
Very much so.
They stay away.
They don't know how to handle the behaviour. So if a person with dementia does something unusual, they just don't know how to handle it.
See, we're having this 5-way conversation. For a person with dementia, that's overwhelming. They can do a one-to-one, but in this they'll then withdraw, become less involved. People talk around them, and they're left out of the whole conversation.
So you're really going to need a pretty good partner or carer to get you out there, get you socialising. That's not an easy thing to do.
There's about 1.2 million carers looking after people with dementia in Australia. It's huge. If we lost them all, just imagine the problem.
But the message to them tonight is, you've got to get out there, even if it may not be that easy.
They know that. They know that. The most important message is to casually take a break yourself. Really.
It's a very important message.
It's a very important message.
There's also a very important section of the community that we don't access, and that is those people who live on their own. There are a lot of elderly people who do have some dementia, some cognitive impairments, who live on their own, and they're very isolated. They don't get that social contact.
We don't want to make carers feel guilty, though, if they can't do it.
No.
There are some people with dementia who just won't go out. It's just too difficult for them. And they're not unhappy where they are. And so I don't think we should send out a message that if you're not doing it, you're a bad person, you're not doing enough.
That's right. But social engagement is so important for people with dementia. I mean, someone who's very close to me, I can actually see the transformation as he engages in activities. And that's
and that's true of some physical activity as well, isn't it? And that's why I said to you before, if they loved music, they should be exposed to music, because the brain reacts to it, and they're calmer, and they're more at peace with themselves.
At what point, everyone wants to stay in their own home, I'm sure, but at what point does residential care become necessary? What sort of behavioural level do you have to be at to require that sort of care? I'd
put it the other way. What are some of the things that we can do to support people if they want to stay in their own home and that's their choice? And I think it is about making sure that they're not socially isolated. I think it's important to make sure that they're managing their medications well, and that they're actually eating and drinking well. I'd also add a fourth, and I think this is one of the challenges going forward, is making sure that we actually we do more in the area of managing continence in the home. I think they're the challenges.
Also safety.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
There are things that
safety from what being taken advantage of.
Well, no, the fact in my mother's case, she just started to wander from home. She could still look after herself in the home reasonably, but she started to wander from home and couldn't find her way back.
Sure. And I mean, my mother used to live with us and had dementia, and I was absolutely sure she was going to burn the house down with my kids sort of in their bedrooms above it. So what did we do? We made sure that we changed some of the cooking items. We made sure that we actually put in really good mains powered smoke detectors, etc. I don't think we should try and eliminate all the risks, because life is about risk. And so if we put people in cotton wool, they're going to die of boredom.
That, and also the fact that everyone has certain rights, don't they?
That's right.
You can't lock up someone with dementia just because of the risks.
I actually think the issue of citizenship is very important. The person with dementia does not lose their rights as a citizen. They do actually have the same rights as you and me. They're not prisoners in the community or in residential aged care. They have the rights in those residential aged care services to do stuff, to eat what they like, to smoke if they want to have sex if... my kids should probably close their ears now. To have sex, to get fat if they want to. Too often we actually...
Have some independence over their life.
Have some independence. Too often we actually have a protective culture that disciplines us.
Well, it's hard to let go. I mean, I used to worry about Dad. You know, he stayed in his own home, and he was almost 90. He was 10 days shy of 90 when he died. And sometimes he'd say to me, "Oh, the people across the road, they're very noisy. I went out last night, and I gave them a piece of my mind." You think, "Oh my God, what did he get up to?" And you know, you do worry. But he was okay. You know, he would sometimes rake the leaves in his garden, and you just pray that it would all be right. And I used to have alerts in the village where he lived who would, if the chemist thought he was a bit anxious, they'd call me, and I'd go up and just keep an eye on him.
So your dad stayed at home?
That's what he wanted to do. And
were you comfortable with that the whole time, or were you thinking...
No, there was a point where my brothers and I were a bit worried about him, so we thought we'd better have him assessed. ACAT came, and I've told the story before, but you know, Dad knew exactly why the ACAT person was there. He came out with his best blazer on and his tie. He was very polite. And then he just looked at her at one point and he said, "You know, people would have us old people put away in a home and only come out when they ring a bell." And so he knew. And they told us he had terrific care.
That's right.
Just keep doing what you're doing. So we just kept doing what we were doing.
But I'm sure for many other families, this is a really difficult...
It's anxious. I tell you, it's anxious. I went up one day and he'd fallen over and he was in the garden. I couldn't get him up. I had to ring one of my brothers.
So what point do you bite the bullet and say...
What did you do?
Well, I just got to the point where I felt my mother was really unsafe, and, you know, I just had to have her somewhere where she was confined.
Is there guilt associated with that?
Enormous. Enormous. It's a terrible thing. I mean, unfortunately, residential care in general is not great, particularly for people with dementia. There are some facilities that are very good and they try hard, but overall, they're not well designed for people with dementia.
Well, let's explore that.
There are a few tipping points that I've seen.
Yeah.
One is where the person stops recognising their family member. Another is incontinence. That's, for many carers, that's too much they can handle. A third is aggressive behaviour or other behavioural disturbances.
Is that common?
Yeah, very common. Yeah. And the fourth is when the carer themselves can't cope. They're physically unwell or emotionally can't cope. They have to go into hospital. Or some crisis occurs, the person with dementia goes to hospital, and from there it's like a sanctioned route straight to the nursing home.
Because remember, the carer is often old too. You know, the diagnosis is an older person, and the carer is often an older person.
If the carer gets sick, what do you do with the person with dementia?
Well, Ron, you said that some residential care is good and some not so good. Stephen, let's explore that from your perspective. What makes a centre good, not so good?
It should be focusing on the person, just as we would expect a service to be focusing on us. First of all, I think we should be saying, I certainly believe that people should be living with dementia wherever is their choice. But as Henry said, there will come times when you're no longer able to be supported in your own home. At the moment, we have not many other choices apart from residential aged care. I think we need to develop other sort of choices.
What about this group homes? I saw today that one recently opened in Sydney, in St Ives, 6 to 10 people living there. It's a suburban area, 24-hour nursing care. Is that a good idea?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, so the residential services that we provide for people with dementia are typically small and domestic. They're familiar. They are safe, but there's a minimum. The locked doors won't be obvious to the person who is. You can check it any time you like. It's perfectly secure, but it's not locked up. And you're able to choose and have your own rhythm to life, so that you can get up when you like, you can have breakfast when you like, you can have your meals when you like. You're not running to someone else's agenda.
But that's really wonderful. That's not the way it is for a lot of people.
No, but I think
how is it for a lot of people?
Well, you live the routine of the facility.
Waking up at 6 a.m, have your shower,
you'll have your dinner at 5 o'clock. You won't necessarily have a really good dinner either. The meals sometimes leave a lot to be desired. Sometimes people with dementia need help with feeding. There's inadequate staff, and
a line of people.
They often go hungry.
Being toileted, you know, all those sorts of things.
Who's to blame for this? Is it the centre? Is it the government? Is it all of us as taxpayers not doing enough on this?
Probably all of the above, you know, but we need better facilities. I think it's about 60% of all nursing home beds are now occupied by somebody with dementia. The staff need better training. The better training is really crucial. Well, I've got to tell you, there's a parliamentary inquiry going on at the moment into dementia early diagnosis, and I read through today some of the submissions to this, and this rings through training of staff, having staff who know what they're doing when it comes to dementia. Just older people generally would be a big step forward. Looking after older people is something we're not very good at.
Henry, is it a case that it's not an attractive area of nursing?
It's not an attractive area. The pay is less than their colleagues working in the acute hospital system. Recruitment's difficult, retention's difficult. Not only is the population ageing, the workforce is ageing. There's an increasing gap between the number of people we need and the number of people who are available. And this is only going to get more so. And we rely extensively on the families to be the invisible army of carers to fill that gap.
So what do we do about it?
Well, I think everyone wants quality dementia care and aged care, and everyone wants someone else to pay for it. And we can't continue as we have, which has effectively been an overwhelmingly subsidised, overwhelmingly funded system by the Australian government. We will actually have to have greater co-contributions from the person who's in those services, be it in people's own homes or indeed people in residential aged care. And so that means freeing up the system. At the moment we have very much a command control system whereby the number of services are limited by the funds available from government. The capacity of government to support the number of Australians who are going to need that, it's just not sustainable. So what will occur is that you'll actually have greater contribution from the person with dementia. So
this all gets into the debate about selling the family home, all of this stuff.
Yeah, but the number of people who... The length of stay in a residential aged care service is about 3 years. It's not 3 months, it's 3 years, which is about half of the average how long someone stays in their own, each home that they own in their life. And the proportion of homeowners who are over 65 is far greater. That's a far greater number. It's like 86%, as opposed to the people who are 40. Are we saying that the 40-year-olds should be subsidising the 2 homes of someone who is in a residential aged care facility? The home that the family is sort of hoping to someday inherit, and the one that the taxpayers are funding. My old man used to say, where there's a will, there's a relative. And we've got to actually sort of acknowledge that that is part of the asset that we need to access for people's care.
That sounds reasonable, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it is.
And increasingly people are finding that to be reasonable.
I think the new policy is to separate the accommodation charges from the care charges.
Yeah.
But we've got to do more than just sort of say someone can be in their own home or in residential aged care. The numbers, be it 50% or 60% of people who are in residential aged care now who have dementia, if you fast forward to 2050, that means we need $100 billion more of residential aged care. We don't have...
And Henry, you've got to figure about the beds we need.
We need, I think, about 750 new beds a month for the next 40 years.
Hang on, 750 new beds a month.
We better get cracking.
If we happen to have the same models of care.
So we've got to have different models.
And what about the staff?
And the staff.
Well, you know what happens now? A lot of people with dementia in facilities get given antipsychotic drugs to restrain them, and that's something that
because there's not enough staff to care.
And that's something we're very concerned about at Alzheimer's Australia, because antipsychotic drugs have side effects like strokes, and a lot of people don't benefit from getting them anyway.
Is this going on?
It is going on, believe me.
A survey published last year, 28% of people in nursing homes are on antipsychotics.
Is that about right, Stephen?
There's too many people who actually have psychotropics and antipsychotic drugs. And typically, what actually, where that occurs is that it occurs perhaps on weekends when there's not as many sort of senior staff.
So this wasn't PRN or when, as needed. This was regular antipsychotics, not just weekend.
Okay.
This is John Snowden's work. It's published.
And look, I think that's totally unacceptable. There should be no... Let's be very clear. There is a place for those medications,
yes, there is,
but there should be no chemical or physical restraint of people. This gets to back to my issue earlier about the rights of an Australian citizen.
Just to say about the system, there's a Living Longer, Living Better package that was released last April. And the idea there is to try and put more resources into community care, more flexible community aged care packages, and we applaud all of that. Yeah. So there are a lot of initiatives happening to try and redress this, because whichever government's in power, whichever party's in government, they know that this is a crisis we have to deal with now. We can't wait.
But the model that says, OK, you're either in your own home or you're in a residential aged care service, we need to look at that, because we just can't have 750 extra. We're just not going to get that number of beds.
Most people would prefer to stay in their own homes. Just like people without dementia, they want to stay in their own homes, and that's what everyone thinks we should try to deliver, community care packages to people at home.
So we need to encourage innovation in new models of care. Things like when the wheels fall off, they'll typically not fall off Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. They'll fall off after hours. Rather than having someone going by AMBO to accident emergency, we need emergency response teams to actually go to people's homes.
Bring the services to the person rather than the person to the services. Yeah.
The group homes you're talking about, having 5 people who have dementia living in the community. That's the sort of more respite services, so you have emergency respite, that sort of thing.
And that's very... We don't have enough respite. And in the country, it's zilch. So if you're in the country...
Rural, remote, Aboriginal communities, it's a major, major issue.
Well, we're going to look at whether there's any brighter news in the research that's going on at the moment. There is no cure, we know that, but we'll take a quick break and look at what some of the research is finding.